Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. This is a supplementary video that I'm now recording for the Riverpod course that I just have put on my YouTube channel. And this video is for those of you who've already completed the Riverpod course. So I'm assuming at the moment, since this video is coming out just about 2 days after the 17 hours Riverpod course came out, that not so many people have had really the time to go through that course completely. But I have to record this video anyways, as it is something that I've promised to do, and it is related to code generation for Riverpod. At the time of recording this video, code generation for Riverpod isn't that advanced as you'd like it to be really, as it doesn't work with, for instance, stream providers. However, the concept still is a good concept to start with. And I thought to record this video before people start wondering, okay, but why didn't we actually work on Riverpod code generation in the 17 hours course that we have for Riverpod, which is available now on my YouTube channel. So in this video, we will focus purely on code generation for Riverpod. It will make your provider creation a little bit easier. It does have its quirks, and it is completely an optional thing to do. You do not have to work with Riverpod code generation in order to work with Riverpod at all. So if you're interested in code generation, then this video is for you. And also, this video is definitely for people who, as I mentioned, have already gone through the Riverpod course. If you haven't watched that course, this video probably won't be that useful to you, but still you could watch it and see how code generation works with Riverpod just to get an idea. And we're going to have a look at the Instagram application that we developed with Riverpod in the Riverpod course. And we're going to convert some of the available providers to use code generation. Let's just get started without further ado and start jumping into converting our providers to use code generation. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Riverpod code generation is an optional task to do after having completed the 17 hours Riverpod course, which I've placed on my YouTube channel. If you can't find that video, please have a look at the descriptions of this video, and I will link for sure to that video so you can just simply click on it. Now, Riverpod code generation makes the creation of your providers, very simple providers such as future provider and just basic vanilla provider, a little bit easier. As you know, the syntax for creating a provider is just using a simple function, but you have to just say final something provider is equal to, and then you say future provider of something something. And of course, if you have, for instance, a family provider, which we do in our 17 hours Riverpod course, then the syntax gets a little bit more complicated as well, because then you have to not only specify the return value of your function, but also the input type to your provider twice. Code generation for Riverpod makes it a little bit more easy for you to create those providers. It doesn't, unfortunately, have support for some providers yet. For instance, we cannot have code generation for stream providers or state notifier providers, which are actually the majority of the providers that we're using in the 17 hours Riverpod course. However, we do have some vanilla providers as well, which we can go ahead and basically take advantage of code generation. So without further ado, let's just bring our project to the screen and start looking at Riverpod Code Gen, which is the plugin that we're going to use in order to generate our code. So I'm going to take the Visual Studio Code pretty much the way we left our application. So this is how we've left our app, and I'll see if I can bring up the simulator as well. So this is the iOS simulator, and if you're watching this video on Linux or Windows, then you will have probably your Android emulator, or you will have an Android device connected to your computer. So it doesn't make really any difference. As long as you finish the 17 hours Riverpod course, then you can be here regardless of which computer you're using. As Code Gen works basically on both, it will work on Windows, Linux, and on Mac OS, of course. So the core of Code Gen for Riverpod is using a plugin which is called Riverpod Generator. So I'll bring up PopDev in here. As you can see, it is called Riverpod Generator, and there are some examples of actually how to use it. So you can see, for instance, here is a marking with Riverpod, So this is something new that the the Riverpod annotation library will bring with itself. And you can prefix your providers with @Riverpod, and instead of creating a function with final my something something provider is equal to, you can simply create a function, and this internally the CodeGen will create a provider for you, which takes care of even the family input parameters, as you can see in here. So you don't have to specify family anymore. As soon as you have some required parameters to your function, this immediately becomes a family provider. As you can see in here, it becomes a future provider simply because it's returning a future. It will become auto dispose, and it will also immediately become a family provider. And then inside this function, you can just do your work as you do with any other async function or any other function that returns a future, which is marked as async. So we're going to use this guy. There is some work that we have to do in the beginning to set it up, but that work is explained right here. So let's go ahead into our project and basically get to it. I'm going to get rid of some of the bars that we have in here so we can focus on our terminal. Okay, so as you can see in here, we have some dependencies. We have to bring in Riverpod and also Riverpod annotation as dependencies. I hope that you can see it on the screen. Let me make it bigger a little bit. So you can see that we have to bring in Riverpod, and in our project, we already have Riverpod, but we have hooks Riverpod. So if you look at pop-spec YAML, you will see that if you look for hooks, you can see that we have hooks Riverpod. So you don't have to bring in Riverpod in order to get started with this. We already have Riverpod, okay? As you can see in here, it says Flutter Riverpod or hooks Riverpod will do as well. What we're going to do though is to bring in Riverpod annotation so that we can use these, excuse me, these fun annotations in here to get the CodeGen working, okay? So let's go in here, and we're not going to work with our pop-spec YAML. Let's go and add that with Flutter, pop add, and we say Riverpod annotation, as you can see. I'm just going to bring in Riverpod annotation to our application. And then as you can see, we have two dev dependencies. One is build runner, the other one is Riverpod generator. Okay, so let's say in here we bring in build runner first. So we say Flutter pop add and --dev. Very important. These two are dev dependencies. They're not like dependencies that are going to be shipped with your application. So don't forget the --dev flag in here. So we say Flutter pop add --dev build runner. Okay. And that's going to do its work. Then we're going to go in here and say Riverpod generator as well. So Command R or Control R, and we say --dev. So we get to this command that we wrote before. And then we say Flutter pop add dev Riverpod generator. So that's the last dependency that we have to bring into our application to get this all to work. Okay. So after doing that, we need a terminal window here in Visual Studio Code, or if you're using Android Studio, I hope that you can create multiple terminals in there as well, but we need one terminal window open in order to get the code generation working and watching for our changes, okay? So you can see in here, it says dart pop run, and this command could be very confusing for a lot of people, because if you run this, you will get an error. So what we need to do is to say Flutter pop, okay, and then run this. So we should say Flutter pub run, and then you just execute that command. All right. And this is going to take some time in the beginning. And what this watch parameter at the end does is that now code generation, this command is sitting here in the background, and it is waiting for us to make any changes to our application which require Riverpod code generation. Okay. But we haven't done that yet. So any changes that you make to your application which require Riverpod to regenerate is code generation, or to regenerate the code that it basically automatically generates for us. Then this kicks in again, so you don't have to do anything. So ensure that you don't close this terminal window, okay? And in Visual Studio Code, there is a handy button in here which you can create a new terminal window. So you basically get one shell in here, which is the watcher for Riverpod code generation. We're gonna leave it just working, so please don't close it. And if you need another terminal, then you can go here, having pressed the plus button, then you have a working terminal here ready for you. So, okay, so let's just get rid of this in here. So the terminal is still up and running, no changes to that, okay? And what we need to do then is to go ahead and convert our first provider to an auto-generated provider. And how do we do that? Because if you look for our provider Dart files, you can see we have quite a lot. However, if you see, for instance, likeDislikePostProvider, it is using a state notifier provider. We cannot convert these at the time of recording this video using code generation. Riverpod's code generation at this point in time does not support generating code for state notifier providers or stream providers. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, it's just not so fun that a lot of our providers happen to be state notifier providers or stream providers. If you look through our providers, you can see that we have, for instance, isLoadingProvider, which actually I think we can convert. Auth state provider is another one, which is a state notifier provider, which we cannot convert. However, if you search through our code for equal provider, you can see we have 3 of those vanilla providers, which we can convert. And also we have, I think, a few future providers as well, future provider. Or maybe we don't. Yeah, actually we do. Equal future providers. So we have 2 future providers and 3 vanilla providers, which we can convert to using code generation. So let's take it one step at a time. We're going to say equal provider and find our 3 providers in here. The first one, as you can see in here, is called isLoggedInProvider. So let's get started by converting our first provider to code generation. There are 3 things that we need to do here. Actually, there are a few things, but 3 key things that we have to do. First, we have to import the annotation library in here. So let's say import and then look for annotation and import Riverpod annotation in here, okay? After doing that, we need to say part, and then you take the file name. It says isLoggedInProvider, okay? We say isLoggedInProvider, is. And actually a GitHub Copilot is trying to help, so I'm gonna allow it to help. But in here we say isLoggedInProvider, so the name of the file, and then .g as in generated, and then .dart, okay? So you need to write it. I completely understand that we're getting an error at the moment. However, this error is gonna go away soon, so you don't have to worry about that so much, okay? And when I say it's gonna go away soon, what I mean is that as soon as I press Command S, or if you're on Linux or Windows and you say Control S, this file is going to get saved. Then this little guy here, which is watching code changes, is going to kick in and it's going to auto-generate our provider for us. And this file will then be generated. So this error will go away. Okay, but before we do that, we need to go ahead and mark our provider as being a Riverpod provider in here. Okay. So after having done this, we need to go ahead and look at our provider and see, okay, what is this guy actually doing? It's basically watching changes to our ref, and then it's watching changes on auth state provider. Okay, so how do we convert this guy? The first step is to see, okay, if this is a vanilla provider, then you need to make sure that you just take this Boolean parameter or whatever this provider is returning, and then place it in here and say this returns now a Boolean. Okay, so and then the name you also have to change. So it says isLoggedInProvider. You need to get rid of the provider from the name. So first put the return value first, as in turning this into a function. Remove the name of change the name and remove the part that says provider. So it then says isLoggedIn. Okay, and then turn it into a function. And in this case, we need to have a look, because this provider is not a family provider, meaning that it doesn't have any parameters. It only has the ref. Every provider that you use using code generation will have its own ref passed in, and the ref will be called. It will have the same name as the function, as you can see in the documentations. If you look in here, this documentation in here says that the provider is called fetch products, so it doesn't have the name provider in it, and its ref will be fetch product ref. Actually, it should say fetch products ref, I believe. So that's a little bit of an error. So in here, our provider is called isLoggedIn, so its ref will be called isLoggedInRef. So let's just write it isLoggedInRef, and then we say ref. Okay. After having done that, let's get rid of this syntax that we have from before and make sure that this is a proper function. At this point, you can see that we have two errors, and I'm now going to press Command S on Macintosh and Control S if you're watching this on Linux or Windows. So code generation is going to kick in, and we can go back to our code gen and actually have a look what happened in here. You can see starting build, and then it basically generated our gdart file in here. So if I command and actually hold down Command or Control on Windows and Linux and click on this, you can now see you have this generated file in here, and it says isLoggedInProvider, which is an auto-dispose provider. Okay, so this is exactly what we needed to do. And you can see in the problems tab, there are no problems basically that we have to address. So everything is going to work exactly as it did before. So your application is just going to continue working as it did before. And if you search for isLoggedInProvider in your application, you go actually somewhere. I think we're using this isLoggedInProvider, aren't we? I wish we did. Is logged in here. We're using the auth state provider. Perhaps here we could actually say is logged in. Okay, so in here we can actually change this guy is logged in, and we say we ref watch, and we say is logged in provider. Let's see if we can change this, and we say is logged in like this, provider like this, and we say when we watch it, we just get a Boolean value basically. We have two problems in here, so let's see what happened. We have unused imports, so let's remove these imports from main Dart file. Okay, and I'm just gonna hot restart our application and bring up the simulator. Let's just test that our logging in is working now. So let's remove this, sorry, let's log out of the application, and I'm gonna log in with Google. Let's see if it works like this. And if that works, yes, you can see now that we're logged in, we're thrown into the main interface of the application. So we can say that this change actually worked. So isLoggedInProvider is working successfully, and we changed that little bit of a complicated code in main Dart file as well, to go from this to go from auth state provider. Now we're just simply watching isLoggedInProvider, which is basically doing the work for us. So this guy is actually looking for changes inside our auth provider, right? So if you go in here, isLoggedInProvider, this guy is looking for auth state provider changes anyways for us. So the complicated code is inside in here, and it shouldn't be in main Dart file. Okay, so that was our first provider that we converted to Riverpod code generation. Let's look for the other two. So we just say equal provider. And then we have this userIdProvider, which is actually a little bit more complicated. You can see, is it though? No, it isn't. It's not this provider that is complicated, because I think none of these vanilla providers are actually complicated because they're not family providers, meaning that they don't actually take any parameters in. The future providers that we have inside our application could be a little bit more complicated because they do have parameters that get sent in, meaning that they become family providers. So let's go ahead now and convert the userIdProvider, which I think we're actually using, yes, in quite a lot of places. So we have to be careful how to do this, otherwise we can mess up the rest of the code. But to be honest with you, this provider is also very simple. So if you follow the recipe that I gave you, I don't think we should have any problems. So let's say import, let's import the annotation library, Riverpod annotation. Then we say part. Then we say this is a part of userIdProvider. The name of the file basically is called userIdProvider. So write that. Then we say .g.dart. Then we say that this is a Riverpod, basically it's annotated with Riverpod in here at Riverpod. Then you need to look at the data that this guy returns. It is an optional user ID. Then you go and remove final in here and instead put the return value. Remove the name provider from the name of this function, so it just becomes user ID. Then the ref will be user ID provider ref actually user ID ref, I think it is called, okay? Not the provider, user ID ref. And then we call the parameter ref, remove this part, and ensure that this becomes a proper function. So meaning that we remove these things from here, the semicolon, and I'm just gonna then press, actually, sorry, this is an arrow function I can see in here. So we gotta be a little bit careful. So let's make it an arrow function like this, semicolon, like that. All right. So we have two arrows in here, and I'm just gonna press Command S on my computer. So boom, and you can see the errors just went away. So by doing that, okay. Now it says name source files using lowercase with underscore. It is complaining about user ID provider dot something, and I don't actually know where this guy is coming from. The editor could not be opened because the file was not found. Okay, well, that is good that it can't be found because we don't have such a file in our application. Let's see. We have the user ID provider.dart and we have a user ID provider.g.dart. So that problem is really nothing that we have to worry about because this file doesn't really exist in our application. Maybe it's just Visual Studio Code that has gone crazy a little bit. So if we've done everything correctly, then we don't have to worry about making changes to our application using these plain vanilla providers, because you can see we've converted this to generated Riverpod provider and nothing else had to be changed in the entire app. So you can do a hot restart of the app and everything should just work as it did before. So commenting and liking, all of that is going to work. And commenting in here, we have hello world, some comment 3 in here. That also works as expected. Let's just delete the comment to see if that works as well. Yeah, good. So that was our other provider basically. Okay. Now let's search for another provider, which is the last one we have to convert. Let's go in here, which is isLoadingProvider. It looks quite scary, but it isn't really. I mean, there's not so much to do. We have to follow the recipe. So import, and then we say annotation in here. Okay, Riverpod annotation. And then we say part. It is called isLoadingProvider.g.dart. Then we go in here and we say this is prefixed with Riverpod in here. And we look at the data type in here. It returns a Boolean. So let's change the function to a bool. Remove provider from its name, create an actual function, and then you say isLoadingRef. So the name of the function plus ref, okay? And it should be in this type of casing basically. We turn it into an actual function, all right? And we call it ref, of course, and also remove these unnecessary characters from there. So I'm just gonna press Command S, and all those errors also went away. If we look at our problems, it's still showing this problem in here, which we actually don't have. This source file doesn't exist. I don't know why it is complaining that we have to create it. I mean, it's complaining about a file that doesn't exist and it asks us to actually create it. And it's complaining about its naming. I mean, if this file doesn't exist, why should you even complain about its naming? Good. Now we've converted isLoading, so we don't have any more providers that we have to convert. However, we have future providers, and these are a little bit more juicy actually. So let's go into thumbnailProvider and have a look at this guy, how we can convert it. You can see we have it is an auto-dispose, and the auto-dispose part you don't have to worry about, but the family part we need to ensure we take care of. Okay, so this is a family provider, meaning that it has an input parameter, and its input parameter is a thumbnail request. If you look at the documentation, you can see for family providers, you need to make sure that the input parameters are required named parameters. Okay, so let's go in the code in here and follow the recipe again. So we say we import annotation in here, Riverpod annotation. Then we say this is a part of thumbnailProvider.g.dart, G as in generated, okay? Then we say this has a prefix of Riverpod, as you can see in here. Then we need to have a look at its inputs and outputs. This guy is a future provider, so it needs to return a future, okay? However, what future does it actually return? It returns an image with aspect ratio. So let's say this is a future of image with aspect ratio. Then its input is a thumbnail request, okay? And as you can see inside this function, this request is actually called thumbnail request and its name is request. So let's copy this part and let's go in here and say we remove the provider from its name. Then we say thumbnail ref, which is the ref. Then we create a required parameter, which is called request, as you can see in here. Okay, so that is all you have to do in order to turn this into a family provider using Riverpod CodeGen. Then let's go ahead and remove all of this that we have in here. And remember, this is an async func, so let's keep the async as part of it. Async like that. And in here, we need to do some cleanup. So let's remove that and this. So now we have a little bit of a problem with CodeGen, of course, and that is because we haven't saved this file yet. Okay, so I'm just going to press Command S on Macintosh or Control S on Windows and Linux. And you can see those issues just went away just like that. All right. However, with future providers, you need to be a little bit careful because it seems fine now. However, if you look at your problems tab, you can see you have 2 more problems now. And these are serious problems because your application is not actually getting built. What happened in here, since that is because we turned this into an auto-generated Riverpod provider, which is also a family provider, we need to ensure that we're passing this request parameter in here into this function using its name. Up to this point, our family providers have had kind of like at call site, we were just passing the parameters as simple arguments without names. However, since they have names now, they're required named parameters, we need to go ahead at call site and ensure that we're saying that the parameter is actually called request. So let's go into these problems that are popping up here. They both actually in file thumbnail view, it seems like it, or maybe it's just one. So let's go in here and say thumbnail provider now has a parameter called request, just like that. And you can see the issue just went away. So we just had one problem and that is fixed now. So I'm just going to hot restart the application, and this is in file thumbnail view. And if we've done our work, then actually thumbnail when image aspect ratio file thumbnail view. And seems like our thumbnails are working at the moment. So seems like our provider is working as expected. So we're done with the thumbnail provider as well. We have one more provider in here, which is a future provider, which we can convert to auto generation, so code generation. And it is called like and dislike post provider, which is used for this button, if you remember, the like and dislike button in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and convert this guy as well. You can see that it is a family provider as well. It is a future provider, and we can easily convert it using the same recipe that we did for the thumbnail provider. So let's go and say import, if I can spell, annotation. Oops, I think I've just placed my finger incorrectly on the keyword, so I'm typing everything incorrectly. So Riverpod annotation is imported. So let's say this is a part of this with generation with .g.dart. And then we say at Riverpod. We need to look at what type of value this guy actually returns. It returns a Boolean, and it is a future provider. So instead of final, we say future of bool. Okay. We get rid of the provider from the name and we turn it into a function. Then we say like, dislike, post, ref. This is our ref. We have one parameter which is called request of type like, dislike, request. So let's just copy this guy and go ahead and create a required named parameter in here. So we say required, and then that request in here. Okay, so that's looking fine. Let's go and clean this function up. It is an async function, so let's just keep it like that. And then we're going to go ahead and remove these last bits and pieces from here like this. And this to me looks fine because we have the usual suspects in here that are causing our application not to compile. And that's just because we haven't saved this file yet. So I'm just going to press Command S on Mac or Control S on Linux and Windows. So there we go. Those errors just went away. Okay. And now we have the same problem as before in that we have to go to the call sites of like, dislike, post provider and ensure that we're passing the request named parameter in here. Okay, like this. Okay, and let's go in here and say now this parameter is called request. Good stuff. After doing that, I'm gonna hot restart the application just to ensure that everything's running fresh. Okay, and debug console, no outputs in here. Let's go ahead and like or dislike a post and see what happens. And you can see we can like and dislike posts as you would expect. So that really concludes this video for us, because at the time of recording this video, we cannot go and convert our many other types of providers to auto generation, unfortunately, like stream providers, which we have quite a lot of. Like if you search in our app for stream provider, you can see that we have quite a lot of stream providers. They cannot be converted at the time of this recording, and states notifier providers either. But I hope that this video at least gave you the idea of how Riverpod code generation works and how you can apply it to a real application, real functioning production level application. So what you can do is to apply the same principles that we talked about in this video for stream providers and state notifier providers as well in the future when they are supported. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the coming videos. And if you have the means to support me by saying thanks, pressing the thanks button at the bottom of this video, I'll be forever grateful. So hope to see you in the next videos, and hope you enjoyed this one.